I am jinxing myself. I am creating a post about books that I want to read before I die, which, as we all know, is just going to tempt death to come for me sooner. I'm going to preface all of this by saying that this list that I'm about to provide is not all of the books that I ever want to read. The list of books that I want to read is much longer. Just like if I say I'm really looking forward to this movie, it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm not looking forward to any other movies. Specifically, the books I'm going to list here are books that I view to be important in the literary world. Maybe they're not really high on the top of my list of books that I'm eager to read, but they are books that I recognize as being important and that I really want to make sure that I experience at some point in my lifetime. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into that list. And the first one I want to mention is Neuromancer by William Gibson. William Gibson is kind of seen as the father of cyberpunk. I don't know necessarily if that is 100% true or not. I don't know if there were other cyberpunk works that were written before his, but I just know that he is recognized in the literary world as somewhat birthing the cyberpunk genre. I think that's true. I haven't seen any evidence that it isn't, but I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong if there was some cyberpunk novel that was carved into a tablet a couple thousand years ago. Now, because I enjoy the cyberpunk genre, and it's the genre that I would like to write in, and even my short story Beneath Magenta Rain, like in the description, is in a cyberpunk setting, it feels weird that I haven't read anything by William Gibson himself. So I'm going to set aside some time in the near future, actually this year I have it on my TBR, to read Neuromancer by William Gibson. I know that Neuromancer is one book of many in a series that he's written, and he has a pretty broad collection of works, but Neuromancer is the one that is at the top of my list of ones to read because I've read and heard that it is the most influential and most important. So I'm really looking forward to getting Neuromancer read. I can't wait to start it, and it is definitely on the list of books that I'm going to be reading this year. I just don't know exactly when I will get to it. My hope is that by reading this, I will have a better understanding not only of cyberpunk itself, but of cyberpunk's origins and of just how far the genre can be taken. Not necessarily because the first book is going to show me just how far the cyberpunk genre can go. More specifically, it's about the fact that this is how cyberpunk started, and now look at what it has grown into. Look at all the works that have branched off from this genre. Okay, the next one, I'm about to create a collective gasp, but it is 1984 by George Orwell. I haven't read it. I've read plenty of other books by George Orwell, but 1984 is never one that I was required to read, and while I wanted to several times, I never actually went through and did it. And I feel like this is a book I could probably read in 1 or 2 days, so it's kind of weird that I haven't picked it up yet, but it is one that I want to read and reflect on and actually understand a little better than I do just based on blurbs and things that I've seen and all of the out of context quotes that you see certain people on the internet using. So 1984 is one that I know I should read and is probably a book that I should have read quite some time ago. I just haven't gotten around to it yet, but I will be getting around to it eventually. It is definitely a book that is on my reading bucket list. It's just not super high up there because I feel like at this point I kind of have read it based on just how much everyone has talked about it and all of the quotes that I've read and all of that. I feel like I get enough of the gist that it's just not super high on the list of books I want to read. And I've read other George Orwell books. I really liked Animal Farm. That's George Orwell, right? Animal Farm? Let me look that up. I did really like Animal Farm by George Orwell. I know there's some people who like one and didn't like the other. Maybe I'll be one of those people, but I feel like I probably won't. So I'm hoping to pick up 1984 at some point in the near future. Now, I've mentioned several times, both here and on my website and on Instagram and Facebook, links for my socials in the description as well, that I think it's really important to broaden your horizons and read things that are out of your wheelhouse. I don't want to be stuck in a rut where I'm only reading fantasy constantly. I'd like to be stretching my wings and finding other things that I can read that I wouldn't normally pick up. And one of the things that is in this list that I really like to read is anything really by Virginia Woolf. But the one that I've picked out for this book reading bucket list is To the Lighthouse, and I've heard that this is a really good one, but not only that, that it is one that is a little more up my wheelhouse, just based on the fact that it is an extremely character-driven work. Now, I don't know if that's true, that's just what I've heard, but many of her works are essays, essentially, and I wouldn't mind reading somebody's essays on occasion, but reading an entire book that is just an essay doesn't sound super exciting to me, as opposed to a character story where, yes, it is sort of an essay, and it is a lot of philosophical thoughts and musings of sorts. They also have characters in a setting, and I've just heard that the work here and the way that the characters are expressed and shown is really interesting, especially considering the fact, and again, I've said this a lot, this is what I've heard, so correct me if I am wrong because I'm just going off of what people have said, but this book specifically, there's not really a lot of dialogue and there's not a lot of action. A lot of it is just the thoughts that the characters are having, which I think is using the medium of literature to its greatest strengths. There have been many times when I've said that stories work best if they take advantage of every tool the medium has available to them. The Last of Us is amazing as a video game because it takes advantage of making you empathize with the player, and books have a really strong advantage over any other form of storytelling because you really get to be inside of the head of the characters and you get to use your imagination to add all of these details and such to the world. The more an author takes advantage of those strengths of the written word and of reading, the better the book is going to be, in my opinion. The more you allow the reader to fill in the blanks and the more that you get inside the heads of your characters, the better the book is going to be because you're doing something that other stories would not be able to. But that's just my opinion, so I'm looking forward to reading this because from what I've heard, it sounds like a really great example of books using their strengths. This one may come a little bit out of left field, but the next one I'm going to say is Kingkiller Chronicle. I made the decision a while ago that I'm not going to read the Kingkiller Chronicle till we actually have a third book out, or at the very least have a release date for The Doors of Stone, which is the third book, right? Pretty sure that's the title of it. Once we have that, I will definitely be going through and reading the series. I've seen Patrick Rothfuss in all sorts of other spaces. He seems like a really genuine and sweet person, and he has a ton of crossover with the D&D community, which I love. I've been a fan of Dungeons & Dragons for quite a while now, and he's appeared not only on Critical Role, but on all sorts of other spaces. He's done streams, and he's appeared, I think it's Red Nose Day. He's done a couple of events there, and he just always comes off as this really sweet and genuine person, and I would love to support someone like that. And not only that, but he won the contest that I received an award in, and I'd really like to take some time to see how somebody has grown since the period when they won that award to apparently 20 years later, because he won it in 2002. So I'm excited to start that, but I really like to know that we actually have an ending out and it is going to be something that I can experience as opposed to being one of the people who is stuck waiting for an ending to the series for an extremely long time. Maybe that's a little bit conceited for me, but just because it has taken so long for the final book to come out, I don't really want to risk that like I've risked it with Game of Thrones, and I may never see The Winds of Winter, just like many of us may never see The Winds of Winter, and we may be stuck with the crappy Game of Thrones TV show ending forever. Ugh. Alright, I have 2 more books on my book reading bucket list that I'm going to get to, but before I get to the next one, I just want to remind you that you can like, comment, and subscribe, all at no cost to you. That's amazing. Wow. Fantastic. Do I sound enthused enough? Doing all of these things really helps me out. It helps the channel, helps me grow, and I really appreciate your support in whatever form that it comes in. And now let's get to the next book. The Shepherd's Crown by Terry Pratchett. I have it on my shelf. I actually have a couple of copies of it. I have it on my shelf. Where is it? I have the Library Collector's Edition version of it, but I also have the original version of it because I received it as a gift for Christmas the year that it came out. I have not read The Shepherd's Crown because it was Terry Pratchett's last written book. After I found out that he died, I just wanted to leave a book that was unread, so I never picked up The Shepherd's Crown. I do want to read it. I know that Terry Pratchett would probably think that it is ridiculous. There are people who are not reading his last book. He wrote it, it's a story, and it's meant to be read, but at the same time, I like the idea of knowing that there is a Terry Pratchett book out there that I haven't read yet. I will be reading it. I know roughly when I'm going to be reading it, but it is going to be a while before I pick it up. I know that it is important that I read it, but there's also some solidarity in knowing that there are many other people who are big fans of Terry Pratchett who have not picked up his last book and read it, because the idea of knowing that there's an unread book on the shelf by Terry Pratchett is a little bit comforting. I'm gonna read it before I die, unless I die soon. So hopefully that doesn't happen. The next one is Annihilation by Jeffrey Vandermeer, and I hope that I'm pronouncing that name correctly. Jeffrey Vandermeer's Annihilation is a science fiction novel. I don't know a ton about it, but there are a lot of people whose opinions I respect who said this is a really powerful work of fiction and there is a lot to draw from it. And it is also a series. I think it's either 3 or 4 books, and they are all books that are designed to make you think and reflect on humanity and all sorts of other things. Now, I've avoided spoilers for it. I honestly haven't even seen the trailer for the movie, or if I did, it was a really long time ago because I know it's kind of old. It was 2014, right? 2014? Something like that. I haven't seen the trailer for the movie, so I really don't know a lot about what this is about. I just know that there are a lot of people that I trust who have said this is a really powerful book and I really want to read it. I myself am just not a huge fan of science fiction, so it's not super high on the list of books that I want to read, but it is one that I've recognized many people deem is important and one that a lot of people should be reading. So I intend to pick it up in the near future. I'm just not sure exactly when. Honestly, it's probably going to be a book that is on my TBR for next year, but who knows? Maybe I'll pick it up a little sooner than that, but I definitely want to read Annihilation by Jeffrey Vandermeer. And those are the books that I really want to read before I die. Those are obviously not all of the books that I want to read before I die. There are tons of others, and there are books that are unreleased that I really want to read, but these are the ones that I think are going to be the most important and that I have heard from people, not that this book is good, but that this book is important, and this is a book that you need to read. And then there's Shepherd's Crown, which I just know is going to be a magical adventure, and it's just important as a big fan of Terry Pratchett for me to read eventually. Thank you very much for taking the time to check out this video. I really appreciate it. If you'd like to see another video from me, you can do so by clicking up here. And until next time, bye.